Hello, everyone. Welcome to like the sixth ONUG. Ernest, man, I can't believe this is like our sixth one that we've been hosting so far. I am Nick Lippis. I'm co-chair and co-founder, along with Ernest Leffner and the ONUG board. And I wanted to just give you a little bit of a background on some of the activities that we've been able to accomplish as a community. Especially in 2014, we started down a vector to really embrace the academic community and also the federal government. And so I'm like so pleased with what we've been able to do as a community. So we had a research track at Columbia. We have another research track that's even better here, really, and Lakshmi was chairing that research track. So that is open to everybody. So anybody can go into those research track sessions, and we really encourage you to do so. Lakshmi mentioned that there was an NSF workshop yesterday, and this is, like, I think, so important. I was able to actually sit on the entire day. And what we've been trying to do as a community is essentially bend the curve in the long game in our industry. And that is one of the major reasons to engage with the academic community and researchers and federal government is so that we see a growth in both the amount of ideas that are being focused into this space, as well as provide a forum for new companies to be established. So we want researchers not only to do great research, but also to start great companies as well. I was like so impressed with this meeting yesterday is that, all right, I'm 56 too, so I've been to a bunch of meetings already, right? So like to say that I'm impressed with a meeting should have a little bit of weight, to it. So it's like, I really believe that we'll see things in 3 years from now that are going to be directly correlated to what happened at that meeting yesterday. So I'm really pleased with that. And the other thing that we did, that we were invited to, there were 5 ONUG board members that were invited to a White House meeting on U.S. digital infrastructure modernization. And it seems like the meeting at NSF, in that meeting, there's a couple of dots that are getting connected there as well. So as a community, we've done a really good job in actually moving down onto that vector. So I just wanted to give you all a quick update on that. Okay, so now let's start with a little bit about the design into the next 2 days. First of all, is that what we've done, we hear a lot from the community. And one thing we hear is that everyone loves the fireside chats, and so we have them occurring tomorrow, an hour and a half, and we've actually now have them into 4 major themes. So we have one on OpenStack, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the reason for that is that the ONUG board is split on OpenStack. Some like it, some think it's more fragmented than the Android market. So we want to have a great discussion about that. Hybrid networking or hybrid cloud. That's another great area where we're starting to see a lot of interest in the community, really from way back at Citigroup. And then also there's another one on data center security and the SD-WAN space, which has been explosive in terms of its growth. We have the Gap, we have Cigna, Cigna, FedEx are in different stages of deployment, and they can share where they are with everybody else in the fireside chat. So anyway, so fireside chats are really important. Okay, also we have center or corner to like ONUG has been the use case concept. Up in the Rosenthal, we have a whole bunch of new use cases. Everybody on their badges has little red dots. We encourage everyone, turn them around, you'll see like little red dots, right? Very good. So vote when you go up, just take a look at them and vote, and the top 3 become candidates for working groups. And right now we have 8 working groups, so more on that in a second. So, and there's also 2 non-technical working groups as well. There's one on IT organization design, which is fundamental to what we've been doing, and then the second one is around full stack engineers. So, so please do vote. It's a great way for all of us to get the conventional wisdom of our community. Now, we do a lot of polling in ONUG, and I'm going to share with you some polling from the last time. Also, we're doing multi-vendor proof of concepts. We want to have a very high voter turnout for those. So please do vote. Make it a thoughtful vote as well, because for the first time, we're going to give awards out to the vendor community for best overlay, multi-vendor proof of concept, and SD-WAN proof of concept that map into the use cases from the working group, or the requirements from the working group. Now, as you all may remember, tomorrow there is closed-door sessions. So there's no press, there's no vendors, there's no recordings of what's happening tomorrow. So all that's happening in this room, and that's just part of the community where IT executives can feel comfortable and free to ask questions without being harassed later on about the question that they asked and what it really meant. Okay? All the speakers, all the sessions that you're going to be hearing today are all handpicked and invented by the ONUG board. This is the only place in the industry where it's really all driven by IT executives. There's no vendor input into what we do in ONUG, and so you'll see that. Obviously, you have been seeing it for the last 5 ONUGs, but you'll continue to see that as well. Demonstrators too, the Rosenthal, as Lakshmi said, it is a magnificent facility and room. It is the place where NYU hosts foreign dignitaries when the UN is in session. So enjoy that space, enjoy everything we have going up over there. All the proof of concepts are happening up in the Rosenthal as well. Most importantly, you all are by invitation only, part of this community. And the reason for that is that you are the movers and the shakers. You all have the biggest, most complex environments that you're trying to navigate and move into a new kind of paradigm. So we are all very honored that you all are here and participating at this ONUG. So thank you all for being here. Okay, a quick note on 2016, and what we heard from the audience as well from the community is that you guys want to have more of a year-round activities with each other. And so we've been doing that with the working groups, and this is probably the most active working community in IT right now. I kid you not. So we're really proud of all the work that everyone's putting into this, but I think what we've been hearing is that we want to do more infrequent gatherings. So we're going to do 24 meetups across the country. We'd love to do one in Japan and also one in London as well. So if you'd like to host a meetup, then please get in touch with Mira and Emily, either at the front desk or their email addresses on the website. You can get in touch with them there. We've also heard from a lot of the community that they want us to go to the West Coast and to expand our community across, or make it more bi-coastal. So we're going to do that. We are just so pleased and so excited that Intuit in the spring is going to host ONUG in Mountain View. So it's a fantastic facility out in the West Coast, so we'll be there. And then on the fall, a year from now, we'll be back in New York City here as well. Okay, I want to do a very quick introduction for all the ONUG board members. So if you're in the audience, just stand up and wave. If you have questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, grab a board member and talk to them about it, and it'll get integrated into everything that we do. Your co-founder, Ernest Leffner from Bank of America, Ernest, there are these 2 folks that had demonstrable input into these next 2 days. One is Harman Vanderlyn from Citigroup, and he is the co-chair, and Harman's right back there, the co-chair of this ONUG. John Storm, unfortunately, can't be here today. He's with a family obligation, but John from Morgan Stanley was fantastic. Obviously, they're co-hosting this. A lot of great input from John. Founding member Pablo Espinosa from Intuit and also host for 2016. Founding member James Yunan from UBS. Gene Sun from FedEx. Michael Elmore from Cigna. Lane Patterson from Yahoo. Conrad Menezes, the great Conrad Menezes from Bank of America. Andy Kilowak, who is unfortunately on the West Coast, can't be here today. Ariel Krishnada from FedEx. Nelson Tai from Pfizer. And the newest board member and someone who's made such a major input into the working groups, Neil Secker from Bank of New York Mellon as well. There's a couple of board members that couldn't be here today. Vesco Polivanov from Credit Suisse. Carlos Matos from Fidelity, and Keith Shin from Fidelity as well. So we have a really robust, great board. So again, questions, comments, please direct them to the board members. A very quick thank you to Dr. Lakshmi Subramanian. Lakshmi, thank you also for NYU for hosting us here, and also, of course, our co-host Morgan Stanley as well. So please let's all of them give them a great round of applause for hosting us at this magnificent facility. Okay, all right, so let's get going. So you thought that's all I had to say, right? So sorry, I have a little bit more to talk about. So we have, I want to start off with, I think, 3 points. And I think you're going to see this echo across the next 2 days. The first point is that IT consumption models are fundamentally changing in our industry, and that has a ripple effect all across the IT service delivery and also the value chain in our marketplace, or in our industry. The second thing is that there is increasing, and I would say almost exponentially increasing demand for new IT skill sets. And we'll talk a little bit about that throughout the next couple of days. And the third thing, I think this is really important, this third point, is that this thing that we do, we've been calling it software-defined networking, is very important, but it's part of a much larger transition in the IT industry towards really open software-defined infrastructure within the context of an open IT framework. I know a lot of kind of words in there, but hopefully that'll all kind of like get stitched together in a few moments. Okay, let's see how we navigate this journey that we've all been on so far. So a little bit about history. We started ONUG in really 2012. The first one was in Fidelity in February in Boston. Like really, go figure, Boston in February. But we were lucky, we didn't get snow. We had a really good event. It was an experiment. It was really focused on white boxes and data centers, very narrow. But what came out of that is we had a really small goal, and that was, all right, does the industry want this? Will companies collaborate and talk and share with each other? And clearly that we found out that, yeah, the market does want it, and the collaboration is really important, and people do want to talk to each other about kind of common problems that we can solve collectively as a community. Then something really important happened. We were coming into like the first ONUG in New York City, and Michael Payne from JP Morgan Chase hosted us at JP Morgan. What he did there, or what we did there a month before, we had a board meeting, and we started putting use cases together. And this is the first time we started thinking through the use cases. And there was an invited guest of that meeting, and his name was Jim Karianis. I'm not sure if Jim is like in the audience here today, but he's from NYU. And he put up this use case around branch office, wide area, software-defined, something or other. And we were all like, really? Okay, well, yeah, we'll put it up there. And we voted on it as a board, and okay, it got a couple of votes, but not a lot. We brought it to the community at JP Morgan. It was the top, I think the top use case. It turned into, basically the bottom line, turned into the SD-WAN marketplace that we know of today. So what was important that we did there, that we continue to do now, is use case voting. And at JP Morgan, our narrative fundamentally changed. We started talking more about overlays and about network service virtualization, which is getting rid of all those hardware appliances and putting them into software. And also the SD-WAN space became increasingly important. Then we went to Citigroup, really thanks to Harman Vanderlyn and also Greg Lavender. And what we found there is that the use cases that we were doing on phone boards and people voting was important, but the community wanted more. It wanted more detailed, thought-through use cases, and so we decided to put working groups together. So that was the birth of working groups and how we started to collaborate year-round as a community and not just twice a year. But also the narrative changed too, because of just the things that are on people's minds. It's a really simple concept. The more you talk to each other, the more we learn about the community, about what's important to us all. And so we started talking about storage networking and how do we put storage over Ethernet networks. And we also started talking about cloud infrastructure. And so we started to really expand the narrative. Then we came to Credit Suisse, and what was important about Credit Suisse is that for the first time we had outputs of the working groups. We published white papers, and we presented those white papers, and the community voted on the requirements to prioritize them. So we had a set of prioritized requirements, and little asterisks on that because I'm going to come back to that in a second. But then again there, our narrative expanded again. We started talking more about container-based software-defined networks, and then also hybrid clouds. We started talking about that a year ago before it became an important industry topic that was really kind of driven by our industry media and the vendor community as well. And then we were fortunate to start the vector into the academic community, and we were at Columbia. And what was important at Columbia is that we took that prioritized feature set, and then we started to work with our partner, Ixia, to put together a set of test methodologies to do feature verification testing. And we did that at Columbia for the first time in the industry. But while that was happening too, the dialogue continued amongst us as a community, and our thinking started to also, again, expand. We started talking more about distributed computing models and what are those going to do to like the infrastructure that we have. Not just microservices, but unikernels and library OSs, and what kind of infrastructure we need now in order to support that. And then we started seeing service providers get into the marketplace as well around software-defined wide area networking. We're here now at NYU. We've done a lot together as a community so far. We have a lot more to do as well. So what we'll be able to do now and demonstrate is all of those companies that went through feature verification and focused on overlays and SD-WANs, we're actually going to see them working together in multi-vendor proof of concepts applied towards those use cases. So I think that's an amazing achievement for a community that we only started doing this about 18 months ago. So I got to stop for a second. I think we all need a round of applause. I think it's amazing what we've all done, right? That's like crazy. I think, it's like I'm amazed myself. So, but I know, like Ernest said, okay, I lost a little bit of weight. I think it's because I've just been nervous about like everything we've been doing. But anyway, as we've been going through these ONUGs, what we discuss in the board is now also changing as well. And I want to come down and join you all. So we started talking about open networking, right? So really focused on essentially the networking part of an overall architecture, an overall stack. We realized also that storage is going through a fundamental change, and also computers doing the same thing as well. And that change is really the separation of hardware and software. So it really is this separation. And once we get to separate it, then what happens is that the hardware then becomes less interesting. We can start to commoditize the hardware in terms of like white boxes and also in terms of bare metal switching or bare metal. And that can be applied across all three of these pillars. So we're thinking about, okay, bare metal or white box switches, or it could be servers or disk drives. It doesn't matter. It's just kind of commoditized hardware. And the software then is extracted, and that software now can be placed as an integrated process within hardware that's running in the infrastructure. It could be on controllers. It can be on some other part of the network or some other part of the infrastructure. So the bottom line is that now we have this total separation. We get agility, we get flexibility, and most importantly then, we have hooks into automation. And we all know the biggest drag on IT right now is the lack of orchestration, automation on networking. It represents 10% of the total cost of ownership, but it messes up the other 90%, right? It just slows everything down like dramatically. So what we're now starting to think about is more, and not just in terms of open networking, but really open networking in the context of an open software-defined infrastructure. Right? Okay. Okay, so what does the ecosystem now start to look like, in this new kind of model? Well, we have all these orchestration companies, and the orchestration companies have really focused around the computing side of our industry. And only now are they starting to reach down into networking. So having kind of modules or networking modules into Mesosphere. The three major ecosystems that we have, like VMware, Docker, and OpenStack, now have plugs coming down into the network that are mostly focused around kind of virtualized infrastructure. So we now are starting to focus on orchestration tools and also around automation tools. Now, those are now starting to plug into various different... Tim, how are you? So we're starting to now focus into various different parts of the overlay part of the marketplace. So obviously there's network service virtualization, which are the load balancers, firewalls, WAN optimization devices as well. And then we have the controller part of the marketplace, and then we also have containers that are more kind of native networking parts. So we have all of that software that's occurring, and now we're starting to integrate that, or we're hoping to integrate that into some orchestration tools. Then the other key part in the overlay is the whole SD-WAN space. And that has just exploded since Jimmy Karianis put up that use case before we went to the JP Morgan. And it's gotten so big now that we actually have categories. So we have now new entrants into this marketplace. We also have companies that have been in the WAN space, but now they're focused on or an adjacency into SD-WAN. And then we have the beginnings of service providers that are now focusing on SD-WAN as a service, so you can have a build versus a buy kind of component or option, really. And then probably one of the biggest plays that's happening right now is that the industry is pushing the reset button, kind of resetting the culture, around what we do in the underlay. So in the underlay, we kind of view it in 3 different categories. There is the kind of proprietary fabrics, and there are companies that provide solutions there. Then there are traditional L2, L3, and the data center interconnect companies. And those are essentially L2, L3 with kind of IEEE or IETF, there we go, base standard interfaces. And then there's the work that all the hyperscale companies and the cloud providers have been doing to really open up the kind of core switching part of the marketplace by having open SDKs, so we can have a mix and match of the different kinds of silicon that are on hardware switches, and then also have different software operating systems as well that can be layered on top of that. There's still a long way to go there, but hey, it is like, that train has left the station, and that marketplace is underneath a fundamental change right now. Now, there is also like management and monitoring that's going on in this marketplace too, and it's the smallest part, and it's unfortunate because we need a lot more companies now innovating and engaged into how do we monitor, manage, and have visibility into these kinds of networks. As we all know, we talk about overlay and underlay, but there is no visibility between those two. All the visibility and integration is happening in someone's head, where they have to open up like multiple different screens on a computer like we did in 1990. It's crazy stuff. It's like we need much better tools if we're going to be able to build these systems at scale. Okay. So I want to make one point on this. All right, now when you look at the slide, what's maybe one thing that you notice? Yeah, it's kind of busy, isn't it, right? But it's busy with software companies. So I mentioned a second ago, there's a separation of hardware and software, and that is true and that is good. But there's also now a new focus on softwareization of our industry by pure fact of all those companies that are represented before. So we used to be in an old world where we were very closed, integrated, hardware and software. All the innovation, all the features were happening at the hardware layer of the marketplace. And the software piece was the smallest. And the way that we manage devices is through this little skinny interface called the CLI. And maybe it might be prettied up like with putting, making it kind of a web browser interface that kind of takes that information and makes it fancy and display. But we really had very little access into the software that was embedded into those devices. What's happening now is that this market is being totally turned upside down across networking, storage, and compute as we really move into a whole new era of IT. There is no army that is strong enough, powerful enough, fast enough that's going to change this transition from happening. There is no one company that's involved in this. There's no one person, there's no one organization that is driving this. It's just like the internet was back in like the late 1980s, early 1990s, where it was just the new technology and there was getting a whole rush of new innovation coming into it. And we're into one of those cycles right now. And what's fundamental to this is that now software is where the innovation is going to, where all the features being written to, and now also it opens us up to orchestration and automation, which is really fundamental and key. Now, there is a lot that occurs when we move from hardware to software. My father-in-law used to say something like, Nikki, it's so simple. This concept, hardware to software, it's a simple concept. But the implications are huge, and they're massive for our marketplace. And let me talk about just 2 of them. All right? One is skill sets around IT. All right? So we've had 25 years of CCIE certifications and also NetOps. Now what I'm about to talk about is systemic. It's not just in the networking silo, it's also in the storage silo as well. And it goes something like this, is that you have on the horizontal, right, you have deep knowledge, expertise and deep knowledge of infrastructure in your particular silo. On the vertical, you have abstraction. And you have folks who really like abstraction. They don't want to know what's happening into the infrastructure. They're closer to the applications. They're closer to the businesses. And they basically look at the infrastructure as just as a means in which to distribute an application. I think that's all really good. But now it's just like human behavior, is that when one group is threatened, with another group, you start seeing FUD. All right? And so the FUD is basically this. The folks that are in NetOps and also that are the CCIE engineers are basically saying, hey, listen, all that abstraction stuff is really great and it's all good. And you can spend a lot of time building applications. But what happens like when you build them at scale and they break? When they break, they're going to break big. And you're not going to have the skill sets and the understanding to actually fix them because you don't care about it. It's like, it's away. And then you have the DevOps folks who are saying, listen, now you guys are just tree hugging. You've been managing these networks with knowing these particular vendors. You don't really care about what's happening in the open world whatsoever. This has worked for you for the last 25 years, and you just don't want to change. You just kind of view this as we've always done it this way, and so we want to continue to do it this way. Well, I think the bottom line is that they're both right. It's almost like the late 1980s, early 1990s. God, am I dating myself or what? In this talk. But yeah, it's like the Miller Lite commercials, right? Tastes great, less filling. There's a little ring of truth, to both of them in this. And the bottom line is that both of them have got to change to a degree. You can't just be in a silo and just worry about your silo anymore. You've got to start moving up the value. And so understanding Python or being able to write script in Python or maybe Ruby would be a really good start. And then if you're doing infrastructure DevOps, also is that you do need to understand something about the infrastructure so that when things do break, you can assist in troubleshooting and fix it. So you don't have like a United Airlines that basically shuts down the entire their entire fleet, for a day or 2 days during the summer because of a problem, or a NASDAQ, scenario, or a, in the, was it 1990s, Dan Rather came up and said, oh, the Citigroup ATMs are offline or something like that. You don't want to have any of those, events, occur. So this is all now leading into a new kind of organization that is really, I wouldn't say run, but it's being populated with computer scientists and full stack engineers. So that was the first one. The second one has to do more about kind of IT delivery. We all know that IT consumption models are fundamentally changing, right? So you can see it on the front end and also on the back end. On the front end, everyone has like mobile apps and those applications, or mobile phones and those applications being accessed through who knows where, like a very large mixed portfolio of applications that are hosted in multiple different locations. And then on the back end, that's our job. We take care of that infrastructure. We're sourcing IT resources from multiple different places today, whether that's in cloud providers or whether it's like doing, we're now thinking about doing the wide area networking like we've never thought of it before, and also the data centers we never thought before. Also, as we move to software, a software-based model, the lifecycle models, or the life cycles are totally different. We had hardware-based infrastructure that would basically change every, every 18 to 24 months based upon ASIC spins. And now we're moving into a software domain where we'll start to see innovation come out, multiple features every month. And so how do we now realign the life cycle of both kind of where we had infrastructure on a hardware basis towards a more software basis? So the bottom line here, too, is that the way procurement has been done in IT is still not catching up. Because it used to be, it still is to a large degree this way. You buy a server, it takes almost 6 months to get that server installed because of all the procurement process that has to occur. And then what happens when procurement gets an order for, say, 12 servers or something like that? Most of the time, they buy 24. Because they're saying, okay, well, we don't want to wait that 6 months for every time we get an order. So they bulk up on capacity. And so what happens when we go to kind of a just-in-time or a self-provisioning model, and now it's all about software and licensing? That is a fundamental change. And so buying patterns, buying cycles are changing. This also has created a massive disruption in the industry. The venture capital community love this, as so do we. And so we've seen a groundswell of new companies coming into this marketplace to provide, to satisfy this new this new change. Okay, so the problem is, and I think there's an opportunity for all of us here, is that both existing companies as well as startup companies are still struggling, no, well, not still, they are struggling to understand this new business model, or a new business model that will map into how IT consumption models are changing. And I think us as a community, it is in our full vested interest to have a sustainable ecosystem of companies that can survive and thrive in this new marketplace. So we're very fortunate as a community. We have venture capitalists here, we have great academics, we have the best IT business leaders and industry leaders, and so we'll start to have a dialogue and a narrative around IT consumption models in this new software-based era. Okay. So how has consumption models changed? Well, at the last ONUG, we asked everyone, okay, where are you in terms of reviewing pilot deployment and if things are on your radar screen? What was interesting that we found out is that on deployment here, this can either be you have bought a product, it's in a lab, or you've piloted it, you have one facility up and running, or you're in somewhere in that stage of deployment. Over 60% of the ONUG community is in some range of the deployment cycle of SD-WAN. That's huge. So you might be able to, this might not be representative of the entire industry. This is ONUG, and we are kind of at the, the pinnacle of the marketplace in terms of our thinking. But what's fundamental about this is that everything has changed. The thinking has totally changed around how we're going to procure and buy wide area networking services and products. In the data center, we have about 42% that are in some level of deployment. Oh, and actually, by the way, on the SD-WAN space, now, since Jim Carianis put up that use case about 2 years ago, we have deployments that are almost about 1,000 sites big now. 1,000 sites on SD-WAN. That's amazing. I would have never thought it would have moved that quick. And then on the overlay, there's about 42% that are in some level of deployment. And then some of these largest deployments are about between 1,000 and 3,000 virtual endpoints per broadcast domain. And the thing about that is that growth is going to go exponential once the companies feel really comfortable, once the community here feels really comfortable with virtual overlays. And then there's the network service virtualization. If you look at that, you might just say, oh, that's kind of lagging, and there isn't that much interest in there. And I would beg to differ, because I think as a community, we think broader. We just don't think about these particular use cases in isolation. And let me give you an example of what I mean. We asked also during the last ONUG, and this is all from our community, do you want to have your controllers aligned with data center overlays and also the SD-WAN overlay? And what is it, like almost 70%, a little bit more than 70% said, yeah, we want them aligned. We don't want to have SDN control islands. We really are thinking more broadly. And then we also looked at the network service virtualization features. So that's like either it might be service insertion or it could be service chaining. And we said, okay, well, do you want to have that stretch between the data center and the wide area? And almost like 90% said, yeah, we need to have a more broader overall architecture, a broader open IT framework than what we've been dealing with over the last couple of decades. Okay. Which really talks to like this one point. What's unique about the enterprise marketplace that's very different from the hyperscale companies is that we are based upon legacy, building on legacy, on legacy, on legacy, on legacy. Some of the companies in this room have almost 10,000 applications that have been in operation, some of them for 50 years. And they're still there. At the NSF meeting, they were saying they'd love to just like unplug some of these servers and just see if somebody screams. If no one screams, then okay, they just decommission them. But they're afraid because like, one of them, you could unplug it, and then that could actually launch a war somewhere, or it could actually bring down a market. So it's like there's a really high risk to do that, so they don't want to do that. But what we do want to do is really get out of this model of proprietary stack, proprietary stack, proprietary stack every time a new business requirement comes in. Not this time. We don't want to do this anymore. We have a major transition in technology. It is our opportunity to guide that transition so that we get the kinds of open IT frameworks that work for us and not so much of the vendor community. And no, really, this is not like an us versus them. We're in it together. But we don't want to be basically, we want to be in the driver's seat in this. And the bottom line is that this market is moving towards a buyer's market and not a seller's market. Now, on this open IT framework, what's fundamental here is to have modules and layers so that you can remove modules without it having adverse impacts on the module above it and the module below it. So it gives you agility, it gives you flexibility, it allows you to do rapid application prototyping and deployment. It allows us to basically leverage an infrastructure that can, in essence, code the intellectual business logic of an organization so that we can be more competitive in the marketplace and hopefully break away from your competitors in your respective industry sectors. That's really what this is all about. It's about how quick you can create business value in an organization and in an economy, in an industry sector as well. Now, I don't want to be Pollyannish at all. We know that there is always lots of restrictions and lots of difficulties in doing something different. And you'll have legacy requirements, you'll have folks who are going to be tree hugging in companies, and you'll have culture. And it's at this part of the presentation that I always look for inspiration from an industry figure. I've always been kind of fond of Grace Hopper for a couple of different reasons. Like, one is that she was a woman working in a man's world, and that is for sure, like in the 1960s and 70s. And she was a woman who was a leader in computer science and in code. And I have just great admiration for her for kind of plowing through that, or navigating through that, I guess is what I'm saying. And she has these really great quotes as well. I'm sure you all know that the word bug came from Grace Hopper, where there was this big bug in a UNIVAC computer, and it turned out to be a big moth, and they pulled out the moth, and okay, oh, it looks like you had a bug back there. And so that's where the word bug came from. But anyway, I digress. So what Grace basically did is she had this great phrase, and she said the most dangerous phrase in the language is, "We've always done it this way." And we're going to hear that over and over again as we move towards open IT frameworks within IT organizations. And I think, and that's to be expected, but I think we are really either in an inflection point or we are about to move into an inflection point where it's more dangerous to stay with the status quo than it is to change. And I can't emphasize that enough. I hear that so much from ONUG board members. The cloud is coming, and the cloud has it is a massive disruptor to everything that we've been doing in our industry. Okay, so where do we look for leadership? How do we kind of navigate this collectively as an organization? Well, you need leaders, and we are so fortunate in our community to have these great leaders. There's Harman Vanderlyn from Citigroup, who is overseeing the overlay working group. Conrad Menezes, who is overseeing the software-defined wide area networking working group. Neil Secker doing the network state, correlation, and analytics working group. Vesko Polivanov doing the network service virtualization working group chair. Ario Krishnada doing the network monitoring and visibility working group. Carlos Matos from Fidelity doing the tools for automated compute storage and networking, which we just recently merged with Ted Turner's group that is managing the automated configuration and change management. And then there's Mike Clark, previously from Fidelity, now with Exceptional Leaders, that is for the first time doing our data center security fabric working group. And then there's also Maxime Bugatti. I'm sorry. It's Bugatti. For some reason, I always... I always think of that song whenever I hear Maximum. So I thought I'd just play a little clip for you. All right, so... All right, I think that's enough. All right, so I asked Maxime earlier if I could do that, and he said yes. So anyway, it's and I always think, I don't know what if my daughter introduced me to that song a long time ago. But if you look at this group, these leaders in our community, what have we done in 18 months? We've published 8 white papers. A community, like, let's just start. 8 white papers that really detail these use cases. There are over 20 different companies and different combinations and permutations that are going to be doing proof of concepts upstairs in the Rosenthal this afternoon. And there are 154 people who are now volunteering and participating in the working groups in one way or the other. We want you all to participate in them. So there is room for everyone. Everyone has a great say into any of these activities. Now, if you listen to like me rattling off the different working groups, there are 8, but 4 of them are focused on really orchestration and automation and really lifecycle management. So what we've done is we're going to present all 4 of those as a framework and architecture later this afternoon in 405 and 406 behind us. And what this group has done is put together an ONUG IT life services management or lifecycle management architecture and framework. What's important about this is that a lot of us in IT work with IDLES. And that basically talks about process and how process gets tied, or basically how we do IT from a process perspective. Well, a lot of that stuff was written in the days of hardware-based infrastructure. And it's also very manual. What this group is doing is pushing the reset button on how do we do process, how do we automate it in this new software era. It is so fundamental important to what we're all doing and trying to get the value that we want to get out of this transition for our companies. Okay. Now, Jim Younan helped put together the Younan 6 a couple of ONUGs ago. And it was the 6 components that we believe need to happen in order for an ecosystem to develop. I am so pleased that to basically report that each one of these components are now part of that life cycle management framework. So Jim, we did it. We got them all integrated and so we're now working towards implementation. Okay, so how does then ONUG help us kind of navigate this transition that we're all going through? Well, we thought about a mission statement, and we haven't had one before, and actually they're really hard to put together. And so we spent a better part of like maybe about 6 weeks or so going back and forth on emails and also culminated in a face-to-face meeting on Cape Cod, i.e. the lighthouse, here, to kind of like show you this mission statement. But it basically goes like this, is that what we do at ONUG is that we enable more options and choices for IT business leaders. All right, and so how do we do that? We do that through advocating. Now, advocating might sound like a weak word, but it's really not, because when you look at the power that we have, the working groups are our organizing principle for engineering and also our massive budgets that we have, and we can exert massive influence in the marketplace. And that's how we advocate. Now, we don't do standards. We don't write open source code. But we tell the standards organizations where there are gaps that we would like to see standards be put in place. We also, we don't write open source code, but we open source all of our documents, all of our test methodologies, all of our thinking is all open sourced as well to the community. So so that's how we advocate. And what we're advocating for is open and interoperable, hardware and software defined infrastructure solutions. And this is the important part, that span the entire IT stack, not just the networking stack, but the entire IT stack. And it's really done for one purpose. And the one purpose is really around creating business value. So if you agree with this business or this mission statement, we have them posted both here and also in the Rosenthal. I ask you to sign your name. If you believe that that's a good mission statement for us all to rally around, then just sign your name, to it. We won't do anything with it. It's just really a point to show that we're all kind of like focused on putting all the wood behind this arrow as a community. Okay, so I started off with 3 points. One was that IT consumption models are fundamentally changing. And that has a ripple effect all across the IT service delivery and also the supply chain. The second point is that demand for new IT skill sets are increasing. I don't have a measurement, but my gut tells me exponentially. And then third is that software-defined networking is part of a much larger IT transition that's moving, that is a much larger IT transition toward open software-defined infrastructure in the context of open IT frameworks.